the firefighters and city employees. Let me thank you all for doing an incredible job, and for the people in the city of Houston. Having said that, from there's been a lot of conversation, reports in reference to record-breaking crime in our city, especially as it relates to homicides. These are numbers that I look at every single morning, with the exception of, I guess you can say, the weekend, but every single morning. And I will say to you, at the beginning of this year, all of us can recall in January, the reports that were being made, given that homicides were at a record-breaking pace, ahead of where things were in a year ago. So, for example, in January, people were reporting that crime was up, homicides were up, let's say at least 65% over and above last year, year to date. And people saying Houston, the capital of the world. I mean, just a lot of reports that were taking place, that were being spoken. We did institute One Safe Houston on February the 2nd of this year, using $52 million of ARPA funding to address crime in our city. Really took a very holistic approach in doing that. It was an all-hands-on-deck approach. So again, I want to thank HPD. Chief Slinker, why don't you step over in the back? So certainly want to thank HPD through increased boots on the ground, as well as through the overtime initiative, adding 125 police officers per day, working very intentional in addressing that. I want to thank them. I want to thank the city legal department, for example, for the initiatives that were put in place, cracking down on so many different areas, and Arturo Michelle and the legal department for the work that they did in moving forth. Crystal Agora has the responsibility of kind of overseeing One Safe Houston, tracking what is taking place in all of those initiatives. Certainly want to thank the members of City Council for saying yes to many of the initiatives, and many of the district city councils for doing things in their own individual district. It has been an all hands on deck. Want to thank our other partners as well for stepping up, county DA's office, and addressing the situation, Crime Stoppers, all of the partners, community partners, people taking an interest in their own neighborhoods. Very much appreciate that, but really want to just underscore the federal dollars that we have received from the Biden-Harris administration as relates to crime reduction. Anyway, the point that I simply want to make, every morning been looking at these numbers. For the last several months, we've been trending in the right direction in almost every category, with the exception of homicides. We have been below year to date where things were. This morning, for example, looking at the numbers, and for the first time this year, we are now below where we were a year ago as it relates to homicides. Last year, at this time, we 192 murders in our city. As of this morning, that number is 187. And so we are 3% below where we were last year. And those numbers have been trending in the right direction. And not just on homicides, but almost in all other categories of violent crime, been trending in the right direction. I'm not here at all to say that it's a mission accomplished, not saying that at all. What I am here to say, and what I want to assure Houstonians, is that with the initiative, the One Safe Houston plan that we put in place, if you're looking at the numbers, it is working. It is effective. It is having an impact, and the numbers will speak to themselves. Now, if it's one crime, if one person is involved in one crime or one life is lost, that is way too many. So let me underscore that. So you're never satisfied until there's no crime, no murders being committed in your city, no robberies being taking place in your city, no assaults being taking place in your city. But from where things were in January, And all of the statements and the reports that were made, that were being made, when you look at where we are today, with the steps that we have put in place, from all indications, the One Safe Houston initiative is working, and the numbers are speaking for themselves. In fact, even as it relates to homicide clearance, and Chief Fenner's not here, but Chief Slinkard and to HPD, the clearance rate is at 80%, and that's above the clearance rate in 2020 and 2021. So more crimes are being solved. And again, I want to thank HPD for their work in this area, because we're solving more. Now we simply need to make sure that as they get solved and they go through the criminal justice system, that the judges, the courts, and everybody else are working with us to keep people there and keep them off the streets. So there are additional steps that are being implemented. I think in July, the gun buyback program will take off, will kick in. So we're moving forward on that initiative, and Crystal Agorafor is providing leadership along with HPD on that initiative. The reentry program, providing employment and housing, reducing recidivism, that also will be taking place. With respect to the Credible Messengers program, getting the community influencers in play, that was a class that graduated a couple of weeks ago, so that piece is moving forward. The crisis intervention initiatives, all of that's in play and moving forward. The technology piece, we're utilizing more technology than we've used in the past, that's taken forward. So it's no one single piece, it's all of these pieces working together. Again, we are not where we want to be, but we're certainly trending in the right direction. And when it comes to homicides, I want the word to be very clear. There are fewer homicides here today than there were a year ago, and we're going to continue to be very intentional to drive that number down even more. Now, certainly understand on any given day and any given week, numbers can tick up. Numbers can tick up. But one of the reasons why I want to highlight today is because in January, so much attention was given. And so that information went out. In terms of the murder capital of the world, I think the same degree of attention should be given when the results are positive for the people in the city of Houston. And that is that instead of being 65+% above in homicides where we were in January, on May the 30th of this year, we are 3% below where we were. So you've gone from 65+% in January to now 3% below. That is a significant swing. So Chief Slinkard, let me thank you all for your work, and let me thank the Houston City Council members. And we still have a lot of work to do, and we're going to continue to move forward. Now let me stop, Chief Slinkard.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for your comments, and the Mayor covered everything comprehensively. And on behalf of Chief Fenner, who's out of town on city business, and all the men and women of the Houston Police Department, first let me say a thanks to the hardworking men and women of HPD and other law enforcement partners in our region who have answered the call and have done a phenomenal job in addressing this violent crime increase that we were seeing throughout our nation in every major city. And we've covered that very well, that Houston was no different in seeing that rise in violent crime over the last couple years. And I want to thank this mayor and this council, because every single time that we have come to this mayor council when we are facing unique challenges, like our country has been facing in this violent crime issue for the last couple years, every single time we have come to this mayor and this council, you have answered the call. And you have answered the call, and you have given us those additional resources that we need, even in a very tough, constrained fiscal environment. You have given us the resources that we need to try to be as responsive as possible to the citizens of this great city. And that's what we've been doing since February. Mayor, you've always said, and you have realized, as we have said many times, law enforcement cannot do it alone when we face unique challenges like this. And this mayor and this council uniquely understand that. That's why One Safe Houston that was rolled out in February was truly comprehensive. It's more than just enforcement. It's more than just law enforcement presence. It speaks to the more holistic endeavors that must take place for us to address violent crime in one of America's major cities. And you can see a few months into our initiative, it is working, because it was quite alarming that we entered 2022 outpacing what everyone knew was a record year in 2021. But we have been able to curb that. We have been able to stem that, and we will take that as a victory. However, the mayor said one is too many, and that is true every single day. And every single day that we put this uniform on and serve our citizens, one victim is too many in any violent crime category. So we are not done. There is much work to do. As the mayor said, we probably still have some challenges ahead of us, but we will face those, and we will face them together as one city and One Safe Houston. Mayor, council, I appreciate it, and HPD will continue to be out there every single day. And thank you to our citizens for your continued support. We need you to help us solve violent crime, and that increased interaction with citizens is working. And to the hard-working law enforcement officers in this region, thank you for what you're doing. I know you're tired, but let's keep it up because we're making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And want to just let the people in our city, Houstonians in our city, to know collectively that we are working on your behalf. We know people don't feel safe, and we know that the numbers have been too high, okay? We know people don't feel safe, the numbers have been too high. And so our job collectively, in fact, all of our jobs, our job is to bring the crime down and to create a safe city. And that's working together. And so as long as there's one murder, one assault, one burglary, it is one too many, okay? It is one too many. But I do want those who have any intentions of committing criminal acts in our city. Number one, the city will put forth all the necessary resources to prevent it. And number two, to fine you, to arrest you, and then to put you through the criminal justice system. That we are intended to do. This Houston is not the city where you want to commit your crimes. And then working with our other partners, at the courts, with the judges and others, then we can have a significant impact. Having said that, if there are any questions or comments, we'll take them now.
Mayor, could you outline or police just a few of the components of the initiative that led to what you're seeing?
Well, one thing is that we've had several classes, cadet classes, that have graduated. That's helping to add to the numbers. That's one thing. The second is the overtime. You know, initially we expended $5.7 million under One Safe Houston to provide 125 more police officers on the street every day. I've since added an additional $5 million to that for the overtime initiative. So that's taking place. The utilization of more technology. They're utilizing more technology now than they have ever used. That is helping in solving the crime. The homicide clearance rate is a key component because it is at 80% as of this morning. That is a higher clearance rate that existed in 2020 and 21, okay? And so they are solving these crimes. And I certainly want to thank them and want to thank all of our other partners, Crime Stoppers and others, who are providing tips that are helping to get us in a position to solve them. So those initiatives from HPD, those initiatives are working. And then they're working with the DA's office to identify the 200 top violators, so to speak, and to really concentrate on getting them off the street. And then I can't say enough for the collaboration with our federal partners. They have really stepped up, and in many cases, we can get cases to trial quicker in federal court than we can here in the county courts. So all of those things, in combination, those things are working.
Can you speak on the 125 officers that you've been mentioning with the overtime? You say it's going well, but members within
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the chief.
So, yeah, so every day you might have ebbs and flows in that number, but our goal is always 125 additional, right? Now, I will tell you, the officers are tired, and, you know, sometimes being ordered to work, right, additional hours after you already have, that's very, very difficult. But you have to remember that's at times also follow-up investigative work that is done to hit that overall work of 125. We have 125 additional, basically, FTEs, and sometimes that requires additional follow-up work to get somebody in custody. Could include warrant teams that are out there fighting violent crime. So all of those things comprehensively go into that additional 125 to combat the violent crime that we were seeing.
Back in February, I had asked the mayor, do you think you're going to have trouble meeting this number? And you said absolutely not, this wasn't going to be an issue. Looking back now, any other solutions to get more boots on the ground? Because clearly ebbs and flows isn't enough for people in the community.
Yeah, so we are meeting our targets and we're meeting our numbers. There are initiatives sometimes where on some days maybe we'll have a surge where we might go over the 125 on some days because we have warrant teams that are working around the clock to get violent offenders into custody. And so that 125 is always our goal. Sometimes we may exceed that, also staying within the budget parameters of what we have and what has been put out there for One Safe Houston. But that's always our goal. And Chief Fenner stood up here with you in February and also said that HPD is committed every single day to putting out the additional resources that this mayor and council will give us, and we are doing that. Now, every single day, right, there's minor challenges that come up when you're dealing with staffing, and then you factor in other major events that may occur that could also pull from staffing. Like we had a very, very busy weekend, right, in the city of Houston with other events and things that additionally need to be staffed by the police department. But we adjust every single day with the ultimate goal hitting that 125 so that we can have the additional coverage that this mayor and council has allowed.
Can you talk about the fact the police department continues to shrink and how that, as you mentioned, you guys are working hard every single day. How does that impact day to day?
Well, the mayor and council continue to add cadet classes, and so, you know, and that's key for us because obviously attrition. Attrition is something that we deal with on a yearly basis. Some years attrition will trend higher, retirements will trend higher than other years. So we are appreciative of the cadet classes that are being funded and funded fully every single year because it's allowing us to keep up with attrition and then hopefully, right, by the time we get through the end of a year, have a net positive gain of officers after we have factored in attrition. And so far, you know, in the recent years, the mayor and council have been great about doing that and allowing us to have our full cadre of cadet classes.
And really quickly, I just pulled up a few minutes ago the response time for priority response calls from the last number, I guess is updated in April here compared to February when we last spoke. It did go down since February, but it's still about a minute longer than 2021. What's the goal? What's the response for the department with lowering this response time for these priority calls? Because a lot of people in the community have reached out to us saying it's taking longer than usual for police to respond, and they understand there's a lot of crime happening, but it's still impacting them.
Sure. Response times, thank you for your question. Response times is always a metric that we focus on. There are times when we hit that mark in response times for those priority one calls that we consider the most threatening calls, those in-progress calls. There are times when we meet that mark and we're below what we hope to have, which is a 5-minute response time, and there are times that goes above that. And that does have to do with staffing. Also has to do with how many people we have out there right at that moment, or how many people are graduating, or when a cadet class is coming off for us to increase the patrol numbers. Then it also sometimes is factored in with special events or other things that go on that might pull resources. And then it's also sometimes exacerbated by spending too long on follow-up scenes because we have too many maybe going on, which draws down the numbers of officers that are readily available and not already out on dispatch calls. So it's something that we always focus on. We focus on response times every day. And when that goes above, and sometimes it does, then we move and adjust resources where we can through our patrol allocation models to try to make sure that we continue to bring that down. And that's it's just a constant daily metric for us that we work on. Sometimes it will be lower, and sometimes, unfortunately, that will creep up. And it's important to remember that, you know, the Houston Police Department, obviously, the 5th largest police department in the United States of America, behind New York, Chicago, LA, and Philly in that order, However, in geographic size, most of those sister cities, we dwarf them, and we respond to nearly 700 square miles of patrol cars and of patrol calls, and have a lot more challenges when it comes to drive time from call to call. But it's something we look at daily.
Sometimes in the summer, we see a spike in certain crimes. What is your anticipation for this summer, and what is your advice to the community as far as helping to keep that in check?
Well, as we cover every year, right? When we enter the summer months, we are always concerned about increases in violence or increases in disturbances and violent crime. This year is no different than any other year where we, give those statements about possibly an increase in violent crime over the summer months. But I think that this year, I would say, coming out of 2020, 2021, and the increases that we saw throughout the country, during pandemic and as we move, post-pandemic, I would say we're even more on alert, and we want to keep that in check this summer, because we know the summer months are challenging, even in a year when you haven't seen these increases. And so I would give the same message for this summer, and we're going to be vigilant and be still hitting our One Safe Houston targets. Commander Garcia.
Well, actually, but just before you do this, because I do want to highlight this. What I didn't mention, too, is that bear in mind that domestic violence was up like 40%. And one of the initiatives where we are spending over $10 million, about $10 million, on the Domestic Abuse Response Program, DART. So that is addressed in the One Safe Houston. The other thing that I want to mention is that when I came into office, we had about 1,900 police officers that were eligible to retire, okay? That was when I came into office, 1,900 of about 5,100 that were eligible to retire. We have been gradually working to reduce that number to bring in more police officers, but it's going to take time to kind of righten that ship. But what we are doing and what I have approved, and that is the Reserve Police Officers Program for retired officers who choose to retire, but to bring them on in a reserve capacity that can augment the police department. So we provided an additional $1.5 million to HPD, and I think that will help to augment. So there are no questions that we are still a work in progress, but I don't want to undermine the significance of what we are reporting today. And that is, in spite of all of those challenges, the homicide rate is below where it was a year ago, year to date. There are fewer homicides today. And even in terms of violent crimes, fewer in most categories than existed a year ago today. I don't want to undermine that, because in January, the public was being bombarded about the percentage of homicides, and the number of homicides were up. And even when we said the number was at 4%, people were saying well, there were still 15 or 20 more murders. Well, today, there are fewer murders in our city than a year ago, and the percentage is less. And I don't want us to lose that, okay? I don't want us to lose that, because it does mean that what HPD and the community and the partners are doing, and One Safe Houston, is working. It's working. And I don't want us to de-emphasize the importance of that, because I've had to deal with it from January, February, March, and April, okay? And people need to know, Houstonians need to know that. We're not where we want to be, but we're working on it every single day to make this an increasingly safe city. Now, Commander.
A nombre del alcalde y del jefe de la policía, Troy Finner, que no está aquí está el número 2 del departamento, el jefe Slinker. Le queremos recordar al público que la semana pasada les advertimos que iban a haber muchos eventos en el centro, principalmente la Conferencia Nacional del Rifle, y nosotros estuvimos preparados para ese evento, pero gracias a la comunidad y gracias a los esfuerzos de todos los involucrados, todo sucedió sin ningún incidente, todo pasó bien. La segunda razón que el alcalde pidió esta conferencia de prensa es para recordarles que en enero de este año el nivel de homicidios estaba en un nivel demasiado alto y había muchas personas que estaban haciéndonos saber su preocupación por esa cifra. Hoy, gracias a Dios, por los esfuerzos del alcalde, del cabildo municipal y del departamento de policía, podemos decirles que el número de homicidios hoy es menor que el número de homicidios del año pasado en esta fecha. El año pasado fueron 192 asesinatos y este año son 187 asesinatos. Inclusive el número de casos que han sido resueltos ha aumentado. Estamos aproximadamente en un 80% de casos resueltos. Y gracias a la comunidad, gracias a los esfuerzos de todos los presentes aquí y gracias al programa que el alcalde puso en marcha, Un Houston Seguro, donde se provieron fondos adicionales para que hubiera 125 policías más o el equivalente a 125 policías más en las calles de Houston para atacar este problema, ha dado frutos, ha dado resultados. Un 3% ha bajado el número de homicidios en la ciudad. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And in the very near future, the ordinance dealing with catalytic converters will be kicking in, and the ordinance pertaining to cameras and more illumination at our convenience stores, clubs, and bars, that will also be kicking in. So there are a number of pieces associated with this. Yes, sir.
One more thing, there's a lot of discussion today about gun safety following what happened in Uvalde. Senator Cornyn and some other bipartisan members of Congress are meeting. Do you have an opinion coming out of the NRA convention and everything else, and what we should be looking forward to as far as gun safety, in your opinion?
Well, and, certainly increasing the age from 18 to 21, especially on assault weapons. To me, it should be an easy deal, okay? Especially when people can't drink and buy cigarettes below 21. The red flag laws, that should take place. So I'm hoping that will move forward. Universal background checks, 90% of the people support it. That should take place. There just need to be some movement. I'm going to, I'm generally an optimistic person. I'm going to reserve my comments until something actually happens. Sandy Hook, something should have happened. What happened at the Pulse nightclub in Florida, something should have happened. Now we've got 19 kids. Something certainly should happen. But even as we wait on the United States senators to work, it's my hope that the governor will call a special session here in Texas now, sooner rather than later, and implement some steps. If nothing more than to substantially increase the amount of funding for mental health services. Because if many people are saying, pointing in that direction, and I'm not one to necessarily buy into that, but the legislature certainly should exponentially increase its funding to mental health. And then secondly, the Texas legislature ought to repeal House Bill 1927, permitless carry. And the Texas legislature itself should raise the age from 18 to 21. But raising the age to 18 to 21, the legislature can do that in a minute. Repealing House Bill 1927 on permitless carry, they can do that. And providing significant more funding for mental health, the legislature, and I'm talking about substantially more funding for mental health, because the state of Texas has always been on the lower end when it comes to funding and resources to mental health. They really need to beef that up. And then anything that can be done to address these perpetrators of these crimes at that lower age, people that are 18, 17, 16, you name it, we need to address that. And then lastly, there needs to be a legislative investigation on what happened in Uvalde. So there are a number of things on the state end and then on the local. Lastly, what I would say for the United States, I think we represent about 4% of the population in the world. but we own 50% of the guns. So something's messed up on that, in that regards. But we're going to do everything that we can locally to address the proliferation of guns and gun violence. And again, yeah, we're going to continue to do everything we can locally. And in spite of all of those challenges that we're facing nationally, I do want to underscore one more time that the homicide rate in this city, since the onset of One Safe Houston, is 3% less than what it was a year ago. Fewer homicides, less than a year ago. And again, to say to the people in this city, we locally, collectively, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you are safe, want you to feel safe, want you to be safe, and to the criminals, people who are have the intent of committing crimes, number one, don't do it, and number two, if you commit a crime, we will find you. Okay, I want to give that message.
Back in February, you mentioned how you were working with the DA's office to create this list of 200 of the most violent offenders and
Yes.
bring them to court. Can you give us an update on how that list is going?
Chief Slinkert?
Be the last question.
Yeah, thank you. No, we're still working with the DA's office on identifying, and it's not just that list, and that's an ongoing issue, right? It's not just identify the most violent on one day and then stop. That's an ongoing effort for our department in concert with the DA's office to find those most violent, especially those most violent that are wanted. And as you've seen, our warrant teams have been exceedingly busy in the last several months out finding those who are wanted for violent felonies and in some cases multiple violent felonies. And so I would say that is a beginning, that's a start, right? Identifying the most violent in our community that we think, one, are causing the most harm in our community, and then dealing with them appropriately through the criminal justice system, depending on where their case or cases is. And so that's an ongoing effort. So I don't want to get stuck just on, hey, you're going to identify some violent offenders and then you're done with that. That should be an ongoing conversation with us. Thank you.
The issue is to push them to go to trial, so that happens faster because of the backlog. So is that, I know you said it's ongoing, can you be a little bit more specific?
Well, from the police department's standpoint, and then of course you'll need to follow up with our counterparts and our partners at the district attorney's office, who we work very closely with. But as the mayor has said, as Chief Fenner has said, as I have said many times, we will do our part. We are asking the rest of the criminal justice system to engage and do their part. When we identify violent offenders and go a step further and get violent offenders in custody, especially those that are wanted and those that might be wanted on multiple felony charges, then we are asking that the courts and everybody else move those through the criminal justice system and help us identify at least the priority in that, so that we can have the greatest realized impact for the safety of our public. Because when you have a backlog that is as large as it is in Harris County, Texas, for the many reasons that have been discussed over the last many months, you have to start somewhere on priorities, and those priorities should be, what do we need to focus on that will have the greatest realized impact on keeping the public safe? And for us, that's those violent offenders and moving those cases forward and adjudicating those. But at some point, it's beyond the city and HPD's control of moving those forward, and we hope that the rest of the criminal justice system engages with us to do that. And right now, our district attorney's office is being a good partner in having those communications with us. And I would ask that, you know, the courts and the criminal justice system do the same.
And because we love you, get you a Dr. Pepper float.
Yeah.
Okay. Get
All right.
ice cream has a milk.